Assalamualaikum and very good morning to my respected lecturer, Madam Ahmadani, and to all my friends. My name is Fairuz bin Rosli, and I'm the leader of this group assignment. The two of group members is Nureiza Natasha binti Ahmadani and Fasihah binti Muhammad Isnin. It is an honor for me to stand in front of you to deliver the presentation. The topic of the presentation is the World Trade Organization, aka WTO. Now we take a look at the list of the presentation. I will present 1.1 introduction and 1.6 conclusion. The rest of the presentation would be present by the group members. Next, the world is governed by the institutions that are not democratic. The World Bank, the IMF, the WTO. Next, the introduction. The World Trade Organization, aka WTO, is the solitary worldwide global association managing the principles of exchange between countries. At its heart are the WTO arrangement, arranged and endorsed by the greater part of the world's exchanging countries and approved in their parliaments. The objective is to help makers of labor and products, exporters and shippers lead their business. There are various perspectives on World Trade Organization. It is an association for exchange opening. It is a discussion for governments to arrange economic accords. It is a spot for them to settle exchange debates. It works an arrangement of exchange rules. The WTO is where part governments attempt to figure out the exchange issues they face with one another. WTO arrangement cover products administration and protected innovation and eliminated the standards of advancement and allowed exemption. WTO arrangement expect governments to make their exchange approach straightforward by advising the WTO about laws in power and measures received. It is protected and complex since there are legitimate writings covering a wide scope of exercise. However, various basic essential standards run all through these records.
Thank you to the previous presenter. My name is Nureiza Natasha. I am going to continue presenting about the history of formation of the WTO. The World Trade Organization WTO is an intergovernmental organization that involves the international trade. It is officially announced on January 1st, 1995 that was signed by 123 nations by April 15, 1994, replacing the General Agreement of the Tariff and Trade GATT on 1948. It is the solution to process to ratify the members' parliament that aim their forces participants. GATT established after the World War II to make new multilateral institution that has to do with the international economy of the Bretton Woods institution that now famous as World Bank. The International Trade Organization (ITO) also negotiated but was opposed by the US and few other countries, so it never in the agreement of the WTO. The final Act of Marrakesh has 60 agreements with 6 main structures. The main structures are trade-related investment measures, services in general agreement on trade and services, intellectual property in the agreement on trade-related aspect of intellectual property rights, dispute settlement and also the reviews of the government's trade policies. The ATO and the World The ATO alongside the International Monetary Fund (IMF) and the World Bank was initially envisaged as one of the pillars of the World War II of the reconstruction and the economic countries that are affected. The irregular round is the lay of the foundation for the regulated trade in the services. The WTO is to ensure the global trade to commerce smoothly and freely happens between the countries. It created the ground rules for global trade between nation members as the offering the system for their international commerce. The trade agreements are administered by the WTO to cover a broad range of the goods and services trade. The 110th Congress is to examine the relationship between the United States and the WTO in two different ways. The next content is the objective of the WTO. The WTO has six main objectives. The first one is to set and enforce the rules for the international trade. The second one is to provide a forum for the negotiation and monitoring the trade liberalization. The next one is to resolve the trade dispute. The fourth one is to increase the transparency of the decision-making process. The fifth one is to cooperate with the major international economic institutions that are involved in the global economic management. The last one is to help the developing countries to fully have the benefit from the global trading system. It has been made by the WTO, where General Agreement of the Trade and Tariff and Trade (GATT) has focused more on goods except for the agriculture and textile. There are also objectives for the services negotiations. The first objective for the services is to achieve the progressive liberalization of the trade in services as mandated in the GATT. The second one is to ensure the flexibilities for the development countries with a special priority to the less developed countries. That's all from me. Next, I am going to pass the presentation to my next member.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Fasihah. So without further ado, I will continue on the achievement of WTO and also the trade dispute. So first, I will explain about the achievement of WTO. WTO achievements show how hard they work in order to make the system successful. It also highlights WTO's accomplishment in a variety of areas. The clearest proof of WTO's success can be seen in the rise of global trade. Since WTO establishment, trade volumes have expanded by 2.5 times. The developing world's share of global market trade has risen from 27% in 1995 to over 43% now. While the share of global services trade has expanded from roughly 25% to 35% during the same time period. To take the most famous example, China is currently the world's greatest exporter when 20 years ago, they was ranked 11. Other than that, WTO has played a key role in opening up and integrating the global economy. This can be seen when repeated economy and geopolitical shock happen. WTO has been able to avoid economy from shutting down and disintegrating. This is because more countries has realized the benefit of open trade, shared norms, and multilateral collaboration, which show the system has worked. Next, while training and cooperating with developing countries and other multilateral agencies, WTO has administers agreements, resolve trade disputes, and supervise country-specific trade policy. Not only WTO increased the value and the amount of trade, but it has also aided in the removal of trade and non-trade barriers. WTO has grown into a more powerful organization than the GATT, expanding the agenda to include development policies, which has aided in the resolution of dispute and also improved monitoring by introducing the Trade Policy Review and the World Trade Report. Next, WTO agreement, which resulted from the Uruguay round of trade negotiation between 1986 and 1994, had created several opportunities for developing countries to gain benefit. Meanwhile, during the Doha Agenda negotiation, their attempt to increase the opportunities with further deregulation. WTO's dispute settlement system, or called DSS, has succeeded in lowering trade barriers. As we can see in the graph below, average imposed tariffs have been lowered in the half over the last 2 decades. It has dropped to the less than 8%, down from 15% in 1995 and about 40% after the war. Certain nations such as Morocco and Indonesia have had particularly steep reduction. However, about 60% of global trade is now tariff-free, with the remaining fifth subject to duties of less than 5%. We are moving to the next point, which is trade dispute. One of WTO main activities is resolving trade dispute. WTO has one of the most active international dispute resolution process in the world. According to WTO 2020, since 1995, more than 600 disputes have been brought to the WTO, with more than 350 judgments issued. According to WTO, there are mainly two methods to resolve a dispute once a complaint has been lodged with the WTO. So the first one is during the phase of bilateral negotiation, the parties identify a mutually acceptable solution. Next, the second method is through adjudication, which include the following implementation of panel and appellate body reports, which once adopted by the dispute settlement body, or called DSB, binding on the parties. Furthermore, there are three main stages in the process. So those stages are parties consultation, panel decision, and the appellate body judgment and ruling implementation if necessary, which include the possibilities of countermeasure if the losing party fails to implement the ruling. According to WTO, at the end of 2020, there are 539 disputes being referred to the DSB, but not all of them need formal ruling in order to resolve them. Usually, the most preferred outcome is mutually agreed solution and also consultation between the dispute member. If they cannot reach a mutually agreed solution, they can submit the disagreement for further procedures. Next, the WTO DSM, or Dispute Settlement Mechanism, deals with the trade-related legal disputes among the member countries. DSM is used to solve any disagreements between the nation. DSM of WTO is divided into two parts. So ad hoc panels resolve conflict in the first years, while the WTO's appeals process, that called appellate body of consensually appointed member, adjudicates conflict in the second tiers. Furthermore, DSM is integrated in WTO, which means a single dispute can involve many agreements. As And as a result, as we can see in the graph, the total number exceed the total number of district complaints filed. According to WTO, the Guide 1994 is commonly invoked alongside more specific agreements in matters involving trade in goods, which is why it shows in 488 of the 598 disputes initiated.
Next, we take a look trade dispute with the China and US. The first one is China. An example can be seen through China and US, where they have more than 300 disputes with variety countries and trading blocs. For the two economic superpowers, trade disagreements are nothing new, and they are not restricted to one another, as shown in the diagram below. China engaged in 55 trade disputes, whereas as the complainant or responder, although the most majority of these are with the United States. China also has 13 trade disputes with the European Union, as well as a few others with Mexico and Japan. For US, there are more than 5 times as many trade disputes in the US than there are in China. 7 of the complaints were filed in response of President Trump's executive order imposing a 25% import tax on steel and 10% tariff on foreign-made aluminium. China, India, the EU, Norway, Russia, Canada, and Mexico have all complained to the World Trade Organization over the steel and aluminum tariff. The US has also filed more than 100 complaints with the World Trade Organization against imports or trade policies of 9 nations, including EU. Lastly, it is about conclusion. In conclusion, the nation settled on their choice through different chambers and boards, whose enrollment comprises of all WTO individuals. The frameworks advance harmony by taking care of the dispute of part nations. The WTO arrangement cover products, administration, and license innovations. They explain the standards of investment and the allowed assumption, extraordinary necessity of agriculture nation as 66% of the WTO individual are non-industrial nation, and they assume an unenviable, significant, and dynamic part. That's all our presentation about WTO. Assalamualaikum. Thank you.